Hey everybody, for those I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Michael Moe, founder of GSV. On behalf of my colleagues at GSV and our partners at Arizona State University, I want to welcome you to our 15th annual ASU+GSV Summit. Once again, we're sold out. We have over 7,000 attendees here from 143 countries. We have over 900 startups that are presenting over the next few days. I was talking to my wife last night, and I said to her, in your wildest dreams, could you imagine that I was going to be speaking in front of thousands of people from over 100 countries? She said, honey, you're not in my wildest dreams. A little bit about Arizona State University, our partner, largest public university in the United States, 180,000 students. Most importantly to us, for 9 years in a row, they've been ranked the most innovative university in the United States. We've been fortunate to get some positive recognition. For example, at the ASU+GSV Summit, Forbes said that we are the Davos of education, and we appreciate that very much. We have 6 offices around the world. We have a couple publications, one on entrepreneurship innovation, EIIO, and the GSV Big 10, which over 40,000 people get. It's free, so please sign up to get it. GSV Ventures, our venture fund that invests in education technology businesses. We've invested in roughly half the unicorns that are in the ed tech space. So we're lucky that we're in an industry that has very positive fundamentals to it. And for society, there's a direct correlation between level of education attainment and GDP per capita, and for people's individuals' benefit. So it's been a growth market. Since 1900, there was 500,000 students globally in higher education. By 2010, there's 160 million. Right now, there's 245 million, and by 2030, there'll be 414 million students around the world. So one of the reasons I think the summit has been successful is we've been able to provide a window to the future and be able to see things here before they actually were well known in the marketplace. Some of those things include, in the first summit, we were talking about artificial intelligence and how it's going to transform education. We were talking about the power of women, POW, and how women were going to have an increasing influence in the marketplace. Invisible learning, about how people are going to learn by doing things they naturally like to do, like playing games. Hollywood meets Harvard. What Hollywood does a really great job of is telling stories and getting people engaged. You can't learn if you're not engaged. So Hollywood makes stars out of actors, has high quality through scale, and so forth. So we've been fortunate to be in front of some of these big waves that have happened. So my football coach in college, Lou Holt, said, if you did what you did yesterday seems big, you haven't done anything today. And that's very much the way that we feel here. So as much as we're proud of what we've accomplished in the last 15 years, we're just getting going. And so as we think about where the world's going and why, we think about megatrends and connecting dots and what are changes that are taking place. What are some of the shifts and some of the patterns that we're recognizing? Importantly, where we see the most creative innovation, it's really by taking complex things and making them very, very simple. So you look at, there's 3 primary colors, but Michelangelo was able to create the Sistine Chapel with those 3 primary colors. There's 7 musical notes, but Beethoven was able to create the 5th Symphony with those 7 musical notes. There's 10 numbers, and look how creative Bernie Madoff was able to be with those 10 numbers. We also think about problems, and some of the biggest investment opportunities are where there's a problem. The bigger the problem, the greater the opportunity. So if you look at the UN sustainability goals, there's 17 different goals that they've signaled, everything from no poverty to good health and well-being, gender equality, and so forth. But if you look at every single one of those problems, which creates an opportunity, the beginning of the solution of those problems is education. So we do think there's some really powerful tailwinds at the back of what we're doing here. Importantly, that we also appreciate that things change. And over time, they can change pretty dramatically, and we're in an environment today where things are changing faster than ever before. So just looking at how things changed. This is the United States 200 years ago, over 200 years ago, when it was basically the East Coast without Florida. And to go from the East Coast to the West Coast would take a generation, and you'd lose half your travel party. Now, when you go from New York to San Francisco, It takes 6 hours. If your Wi-Fi doesn't work, you're pissed off. So take a close look at this picture. This is the Tour de France 100 years ago. Right? So 100 years ago, it was thought that cigarette smoking actually enhanced your athletic performance. So this is Henry Ford in Detroit 100 years ago. He was the Elon Musk of his day. In Detroit, Michigan was the Silicon Valley where the ambitious were trying to change the world moved because that's where it was all happening. 100 years ago, Silicon Valley was made up of apricot fields and apple orchards, and the farm, Stanford University, was little known by anybody east of the Mississippi. Obviously today, Silicon Valley is the home of many of the game-changing businesses that are transforming the world as I speak, from Google to Apple to Intel to Facebook and many, many others, obviously. So this is Gordon Moore. So Gordon Moore had this idea just about 60 years ago that computing power is going to double every couple of years. And what's so interesting about what ultimately became known as Moore's Law, it wasn't a scientific law or physical law. It was basically Gordon Moore imposing his will upon an industry and not only transforming technology, but also transforming the world as we know it. Just since 2000, the impact of Moore's Law, the cost of computing has gone down 99%. Cost of storage is basically free with infinite capacity. If the automobile industry would have had that same type of progress, a Ford Taurus that cost $20,000 in 1990 would cost less than $1 today, and you'd throw it away after you used it. So this is 2007, the market value of BlackBerry and Apple. And you remember BlackBerry? People loved it so much, right? Pretty loud, right? Exactly. But many of you had BlackBerries, and they called them crackberries because people were so addicted to them. And Apple and BlackBerry at the time had the exact same market cap at $70 billion each. And that's when the iPhone was introduced. And so what's happened since? Well, it's changed a little bit. Apple's market cap is $2.7 trillion, and BlackBerry's less than $2 billion. Take a close look at this picture. This is St. Peter's Square at the Vatican in 2005. You got it? So this is what it looks like today. So obviously what's happened in the last 19 years is everybody's become a photographer with your smartphone. And what's so interesting though is during that same period we have this explosion of photography. Kodak, which was synonymous with photography, went bankrupt in 2011. So if you really want to see the future, study demographics. And so from a geographic standpoint, I think it's fascinating. 7 of the 10 fastest growing countries in the world last year were in Africa. If you look at Africa's population, 1.1 billion people, of that 41% are under the age of 15 years old. The Nigerian birth rate is 5.3 births per woman. Compare that to the United States, which is 1.5. Europe is 1.4. If you look at East Asia, it's even less than that. So if you fast forward this, Lagos by 2050 is expected to have 40 million people itself. Today, the 3 largest cities in the world are in Asia. But the problem with that is when you look at Japan, for example, for every birth, you're having 2 deaths. So basically, that society is literally going away. And you look by 2100, the 3 largest cities in the world are going to be in Africa. And if you want to see how one of the ways to participate in that, so Abu Dhabi and Dubai, which I call the capital of capital, is not just the capital of capital, but it's really the window to the future. It's the hub because it's a short flight to Africa, it's a short flight to India, it's a short flight to Tel Aviv. It's really become the hub of the future. If you really want to see the future, you study young people. So this is Gen Z. This is age 12 to 28 right now. So what does Gen Z look like in terms of their behaviors? Well, 12th graders who think it's hard to have hope in the world is 40%. The percentage of Gen Z that constantly takes prescription medication is 57%. Percent of teens that feel lonely, it's more than doubled since the last 30 years to 40%. Adolescent suicides has tripled. Looking at the number of teens taking antidepressants, basically didn't exist in 1992. Now 37% of teenagers take antidepressants. So in that period of time, Eli Lilly's market cap has grown by more than $700 billion by selling a lot of Prozac. Overdoped, the dopamine culture. You look at how plugged in, always on, the Gen Zs are. So we now have 7 billion smartphones, for almost one for every man, woman, child in the world. You have 5.4 billion people on the internet versus 361 in 2000. 91% of all teenagers play video games. The global spending on video games has gone up 8x in the last 13 years to 260 billion. The New York Times has more subscribers to their games today than to their news. Screen time in 2010 was 13 hours a week of screen time. It's now 13 hours a day. And from kindergarten through 12th grade, students will play spend more time playing games than they actually spent in the classroom. And 39% of all Gen Z listens to podcasts at a faster than normal speed versus 1.5% overall. So what's happened? 20 years ago, the average American attention span was 150 seconds. Today, 8 seconds, which is 1 second less than a goldfish. What's now also happened is influencers are the new institutions. The middleman has gotten eliminated. If you look at the #1 sports channel on YouTube, it's Dude Perfect. The #1 business and finance channel is All In Podcast. The #1, look at Tucker Carlson going from Fox News, where he had 3.1 million viewers a night. Average, it's 100 million views on many of his shows. Barry Weiss, who's going to be up in a few minutes. Exactly. Give another one for that. Has gone from the editorial board of the New York Times to create the #1 Substack publication in the world. This is Mr. Beast. He had 2.5 billion views in a month. He's taken that volume and done a number of things with it, including creating a candy bar where it went from 0 to 200 million sales in 2 years. YouTube now has a market value bigger than Comcast and Disney combined. And also this new world that we're going into, everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. 72% of high school students say they want to be an entrepreneur. 65% of college students say they want to be an entrepreneur or work at a startup. And the great news is it's never been easier. This Jensen from NVIDIA said everybody in the world is now a programmer. This is the miracle of artificial intelligence. So AI is going to replace the perspiration economy. And if you look at what's really interesting to me, that 58% of all unicorns now have co-founders who didn't have a computer science degree, which is thought to be the prerequisite. So in 2010, when we started the ASU+GSV Summit, there was $500 million of venture capital in education technology, and we thought that was amazing, because if you added up all the venture capital that had come into education technology before that, it wouldn't have added up to $500 million. And look what happened during the next 11 years. It grew at 40% CAGR to reaching $20.8 billion by 2021. And you saw a big shift into this real global Silicon Valley, where in 2010, 75% of all venture capital was the United States, 3/4 of it. And so today, 2/3 of venture capital is outside the United States. And so while things change, there's patterns that repeat. And so good times create weak people.
I left for work early for a 9 a.m. meeting that was conveniently canceled right beforehand. But luckily I got to the lobby and there were these eucalyptus towels waiting for me, which is really nice, and some fresh orange water, which I of course took before taking the elevator up to the office. I grabbed some breakfast, normal oatmeal and chia seed pudding, and we finally got LinkedIn mugs in the office, which I'm so excited about. Then I found out that the wall art that we have in the office is made out of recycled trees from Chicago, which was so cool, fun fact. And then it was time for our company all hands, so I grabbed our drink of the day, which is a blackberry mojito, and headed downstairs to the all hands room with some of my coworkers.
Weak people create hard times. If you look what's happened the last couple of years, it's been a tough environment, by the way, broadly speaking, but certainly in the education technology space, and some mistakes that were made that have come back and been painful. Looking at the overall funding, we went from this 40% CAGR to the last couple of years. You had an 86% decline in ed tech funding globally, 99% decline in China, 91% decline in India. M&A has dropped 53%, and the number of startups that have shut down has risen 270% in the last year alone. So it's been a tough environment, and it's really been, kind of a winter type of season, and a lot of people in the winter hibernate, but it's hard times that create strong people. So 50% of the Fortune 500 was created during a recession or a bear market. 74, 76 recession, that's when Apple and Microsoft started. After the dot-com bust, you had Facebook, LinkedIn, Palantir, Tesla, and many, many others. After the 2007 financial crisis, you had Airbnb, WhatsApp, Stripe, and so forth. And in education technology, which is really the birth of this industry in many respects, Duolingo, Coursera, 2U, Coursera, Chegg, and ClassDojo, some examples of companies that started in that period of time. Strong people create good times, and so you look at the cycle back to patterns. It goes over and over again. We've seen it throughout history. Another trend that we're focused on, and what does it mean, is the trust in institutions has collapsed. So confidence in Congress, it's 8%. Confidence in organized religions, down to 32%. Confidence in newspapers has been cut in half. Confidence in higher education has fallen 21 points. And people say, is college worth it? You got basically, that number is dropping half just in the past 12 years. So in 2008, President Obama talked about college for all. And the good news is we've seen a continued increase in the number of adults with a college degree, reaching 38% by 2023. But in that same period of time where you've had drop in many, many consumer products, from everything from televisions to software, much of that influenced by Moore's Law, textbooks have increased 154%, college tuitions increased 185%. Look at the four-year total cost of higher ed. It's $220,000 for a private institution, $105,000 for a public institution. Ivy League is $340,000 plus. And not coincidentally, there's now $1.7 trillion of student debt, more than credit card debt. So the number of Gen Z that is second-guessing the traditional college education is 74%. More than half the people who graduate from college don't use their degree at all. And 78% of Americans hate their jobs. We got 11 million open jobs. We've got 7.2 million working-age males that are not in the labor force. It's just last week, the Wall Street Journal wrote an article about this. So it's not college for all. It's really a lot of the questions being asked, is it college at all? So 72% of employers prioritize skills experience over diplomas. 55% of employers eliminated degree requirements during 2023. And jobs that require a bachelor's degree fell to 14% last year. So what the market's telling us is about knowledge, not college. And that shift has been going on in a big way. And so for as long as I can remember, the argument was that there's a difference between somebody who has a high school education, a college education, you had an earning delta. And so we reached $1.2 million. Which sounds pretty good when college costs a lot less money than it costs today. But a rational person looking at that $1.2 million but $200,000 expense, if you took that $200,000 expense and invested it in the stock market, which has returned 10% over time, in 50 years that would be $23.5 million, a lot more than the $1.2 million difference that we saw. So the real question is, does college have a product market fit problem? So let's look at it. So U.S. college students with a full-time job is 40%. The percent of college students with children is 25%. Non-traditional students today are 73% of the college population. The problem is that most universities are set up for 18 to 22-year-olds, classes during the day, offered twice a year, dormitories, football team, marching band, swimming pool, all irrelevant to almost 3/4 of the student population. The University of Kentucky spent $1 million per day building facilities over the past decade. So you look across the United States, there's 4,500 universities. You have 100 of them with an endowment of $1 billion or more. If you look at the 20 elite universities, has 1% of the students, but 45% of the endowment, that's $333 billion. And then you look at the sports business, and the Power 2 conferences, SEC and Big Ten, have $13 billion in media rights they're talking about, but it's much more than just the TV and the fans in the stands. It's also about what does it mean for the school overall. So the Coach Prime effect, University of Colorado has increased its applications by 50% since he became coach. During Nick Saban's tenure at Alabama, their student base went up 50%, which means hundreds of millions of dollars to the University of Alabama every year from that. So the real question, at least to me, is what will happen to the 4,000 universities without massive endowments for big-time sports? So case study, Gustavus Adolphus. How many in this room have heard of Gustavus Adolphus? Okay, I like to have fellow Minnesotans here because you have to be from Minnesota. The only people who know Gustavus Adolphus are from Minnesota, or Minneapolis probably. And yet this institution has been around and it's been able to raise its tuition at 3.5 times inflation for the past 40 years. And the question becomes, what happens when the music stops in this game of musical chairs that's going on? Clayton Christensen in 2018 predicted that 50% of the colleges will be bankrupt by 2028. But obstacles create opportunities. And so a model I like to think about, and we were fortunate to be early investors in Spotify, is thinking about the record industry, which before Spotify, basically all the power was with the record label. If to listen to a song, you had to buy the whole album. And you basically paid for the album. Now you get to, with Spotify, you go from just a subscription. Also looking at other models, in particular in the things that are changing so fast, you get the degree, but you drive it off the campus. And because things are changing, is the value that going up or down? What Tesla's able to do with upgrading their software every 2 weeks, the value of the car stays constant or increases. So as I think about the shift of where we're going, the institution of the future, we're going from 4-year degrees to 40-year degrees, cost per credit to subscriptions, but from a physical campus model, a lot of physical assets to a blended model, from a degree to create a knowledge currency, from going a closed proprietary system to an open system, by the way, which works, is winning everywhere, in every industry. From just focusing on learning to earning, have a prix-fixe menu versus all you can eat, one menu, endless feast, office hours to a co-pilot with your AI study buddy. Just-in-case learning to just-in-time learning, a random walk in terms of how you manage your academic career to a hero's journey really focused on what motivates you and where you're trying to go. So I talk about putting the community back into college, because I think the opportunity for the college and university in the future is being this community hub for a variety of activities, but back to this 40-year degree and matching up learning with earning and really being a resource to that community. Just an example, a friend of mine, Dr. Dutt, has a business called APIC who's partnering with universities because they've got a transformative technology that basically is going to enable this whole AI revolution that we're seeing today. But key for his success, and he has this amazing technology, is he has to be where the university students are that can work at the company. So just a kind of interesting model to the future. I look to the past. You look at one of the most successful people in the world, Warren Buffett. What was his academic journey? What was his hero journey like? So it started kind of traditionally, or in some ways it was traditional. He went to the University of Nebraska, got his business degree from Columbia Business School. But he said, the $100 course in Dale Carnegie gave him the most important degree he had today. That was basically his finishing school, helped him learn to communicate. Learned business through a paper route. He started his entrepreneurial journey where he started to refurbish pinball machines and sell them to barbershops. His first investment in Geico came on a kind of a walkabout where he just kind of stumbled into this office and started talking to the person that was working there on Saturday. And then he had lifelong mentors that helped him all along the way to really grow and evolve and help make decisions. And then he had experiential learning when he actually bought Berkshire Hathaway, which was a terrible investment. It's a textile industry, but he learned a lot from that. He made the comment, when a management with a reputation for brilliance tackles a business with a reputation for bad economics, it is the reputation of the business that remains intact. And maybe most instructive, Warren Buffett's now over 90 years old, he still reads 5 hours a day. So back to being a lifelong learner and continue to grow, that was his model. Net worth $137 billion. So it's just, going to K-12, we know, A Nation at Risk came out now 40 years ago. Terrence Bell, the Secretary of Education, said at that time, if a foreign adversary were to impose our education system on us, we'd view it as an act of war. But during that last 40 years, in 2023, we had the lowest math scores in the history of the PISA test, which began in 2003. At the same time, high school graduation rate has gone up to 87%. That's the good news. The bad news is the percent of high school grads who can't read has grown to 19%. And you look at some of the largest cities in the country, the numbers of high school students who can't read is shocking. Number of students that are chronically absent, more than 25%. Percent of students who are poor, 38%. Minority students are 45%, so pretty soon the minority is going to be the majority. Percent who are Hispanics, 25%. Percent of kids born to a single parent, 41%. So then look at that, and then you look at the mix of spending. There's now $16,000 spent per kid in the United States every year on average. Look in New York City, it's actually $38,000. One question I ask is, where does the money go? So if you took that $38,000 and multiplied it by 20 students, that gets us $760,000 per classroom. So if the average teacher makes $80,000, and you got generous and said it had technology and books and other things that cost $80,000, where does that other $600,000 go? And the answer is it's basically consumed by the bureaucracy. And so you can't think of another service industry that exists in the world where over 50% of every dollar is being spent outside of where the service is being rendered unless the government supports it. So you look at what parents said. Historically, 64% of parents aren't satisfied with the U.S. education system. Yet the irony is 76% of parents historically said they were completely satisfied with their own child's education. That was then. This is now. So before Corona, that was the data. But what happened, you had 1.6 billion students that were thrown in the deep end of the online learning pool and told to sink or swim. Some sank. Some crawled to the edge of the pool, got out, so they're never going back in. But many flailed around a little bit and got used to it, and that's the genie's not going back in the bottle. But at that same time, parents kind of looking over their child's into the Zoom, didn't like what they were seeing. So when the mask came on, the mask came off in terms of what was going on. And that coupled with some other type of commentary that had parents upset, said, Terry McAuliffe famously said, I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. And the Yunkin Revolution kind of took place. So what's fascinating to me, in a country where we can't agree what day of the week it is, we now have approximately 75% of all Americans, Republican and Democrat, that support school choice. You got 75% that support charter schools, 75% support ESAs. And part of that is because people want alternatives, and part of that is because the data supports it. This is a recent Stanford study which showed charter schools outperform traditional schools. And most importantly, for poor kids, they dramatically outperform, so given true choice. So education truly is the civil rights issue of our time. And 2023 was the year of choice. That deserves a clap, for sure. So the first charter school was back in my homeland of Minnesota at St. Paul in 1991. And then you had Waiting for Superman 20 years later, gave a lot of people awareness of many of the inequities of what was going on in public schools. But still, it was a long time coming. As Steve Jobs said, these overnight successes take a hell of a long time. And now, though, we have 36% of all K-12 students enrolled in non-traditional, non-local schools. You have 8,000 charter schools. You have 3.7 million students in charter schools. You have 691 virtual charter schools. You have 483,000 students in those virtual charter schools, and have some very inspiring charter networks that are being created around the country. You have 2.2 million students in micro schools, and again, a number of interesting entrepreneurial companies that are supporting that wave. 33 states now have ESAs or vouchers. You have 72 voucher ESA programs. And you have 3.6 million students now in homeschool. Here's a really interesting homeschool story. So Thomas Edison came home from school and gave a sealed note from his teacher to his mother. He said, "Mom, my teacher gave this paper to me and told me you can read it. What does it say?" Her eyes filled up with tears, and she said, "It says, your son is a genius. This school is too small for him. It does not have good enough teachers to train him. Please teach him yourself." So one day after his mother passed, he went through her belongings and found the folded letter that his old teacher wrote to his mother. He opened it. It said, "Your son is mentally deficient. We cannot let him attend our school. He is expelled." So the person that invented the light bulb, the phonograph, the movie camera, and many other things, basically was expelled. So Thomas Edison was a mentally deficient child. His mother turned him into the genius of the century. His close friend, Henry Ford, said, "Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right." Other homeschool graduates include Tim Tebow, Taylor Swift, Teddy Roosevelt, and many others. Just as I close up, AI, I guess, obviously everybody's come up to me and said everything's about AI, and you know what? That's true. AI is truly going to transform the world that we're in. It already is doing so. And we're very proud of the AIR show that we just had over at the Convention Center. Thank you for all that participated in that. But why we, yeah. But why we call it the AIR show is one, AI revolution, AIR. But we also say that AI is like AIR because it's invisible, it's ubiquitous, and you're going to need it to live. So if you just look at what kind of opportunity, this is going to happen, we think, pretty fast. We just got 5% capture of the $8 trillion education market. That's a $400 billion opportunity that we're looking at. Bill Gates said most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. And we see that cycle repeating itself. This is called the Gartner hype cycle. And so when you got a new disruptive technology, everybody gets excited about it, but goes through this kind of classic patterns that we see over and over again. But where this ends up, we think is pretty revolutionary. Important for the entrepreneurs in this room, I like to say the early bird gets the turd. And what do I mean by that? You always think you have to be that first mover advantage. Well, I mean, the internet is probably the closest thing that we've seen to this. And Google didn't come out until these other companies all had been already created. So we all know, we think AI is going to be incredible in the classroom. Every teacher is going to have their own teacher assistant. Every student's going to be able to have a great digital tutor in their pocket. This is just an example of a digital twin. This is my daughter, Maggie, and she's a Tony Robbins devotee. So she went to his seminar, Date with Destiny, and the following day she gets a text from Tony AI saying, "I'm Tony AI," and now she gets to be able to ask him questions all the time to keep that experience going. It's been really very cool. So just talking about time and how we're going to be constantly learning and how do we do that and how AI creates time. Let's play a quick
Let me ask you this question. Have you ever considered how much time you've wasted in your life urinating?
Hundreds of hours.
Fucking right. I mean, you could be learning something in that time, you know? It is for us, rather, to be dedicated here to the great task remaining before us. That from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave their last full measure of devotion. For which they gave their last full measure of devotion.
So what AI is going to do is it's going to manufacture time, which is a big deal. So Mark Andreessen talked about the biggest technological, what he thinks the greatest technological invention in his lifetime is the earpod. The earpod because he's able to learn constantly by doing other things, creating time for himself. So AI has gone from informing life to transforming life. And historically, it was just the super rich that basically were able to get that time dividend. So if you're super rich, you could have maybe a butler, you have a private plane, you have a gardener, and many, many other things. I don't think Elon Musk has made a dinner reservation in a long time. So what we see going on, and what, just to kind of, as we wrap up, we see this time dividend times knowledge proliferation equaling this innovation explosion. And that's what this room is all about. This innovation explosion is going to be like something we've never seen before, and how we think it can transform society is going to be like nothing we've seen before. So just the last trend, and this all comes together. So AI is going to be this unleashing of incredible innovation and talent and knowledge gaining. But you combine that with this other shift that we've seen take place that is really, really powerful. And that is how young people and Gen Z is wired. So Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of the Nations in 1776. And in it, he talked about this invisible hand, which basically is this idea that if you match economic incentives with business objectives, this invisible hand magically guided behavior towards that. And that was really the birth of capitalism, which was the greatest gain for creating increased people's circumstances ever. Also in 1776, Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. In it, he talked about everybody who deserved life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. A lot of people don't know that George Washington, in his inaugural address in 1789, wrote about a different type of invisible hand. And that was one of providence and of meaning. What people really were seeking was to have meaning and purpose in their life. If you look what's happening, 54% of Gen Z has a negative view of capitalism. 51% of Gen Z actually has a positive view of socialism. 67% of young Brits want socialism. This isn't because young people are stupid. It's what actually has happened. It's what they've experienced. They've experienced a system that hasn't worked and seems unfair. And so what's the answer? So Adam Smith's invisible hand is clearly broken. And what I believe fixes Adam Smith's invisible hand is marrying it with George Washington's invisible hand. And together you get this movement that we call mission companies. And so my friend Mike Carter, who's in the audience somewhere, and I wrote a book called The Mission Corporation, which talked about this combination of purpose and profits, which I believe what you're going to see happen, you're seeing happening already, is the great businesses of tomorrow are going to have the ambition of a for-profit and the heart of a not-for-profit. Also announcing tonight, we're creating something called the Global Mission Institute, which is going to be a hub of these mission type of activities. We think so much of this kind of combining purpose and profits, we added a fifth P to our 4P formula that we had for many years, because we do think that great businesses need that purpose really to achieve their significance. So everybody knows there's growth investors and there's value investors, but we are values investors, because we're looking for companies that have purpose and profits to them, and we invest in smarts and hearts. Importantly about investing in smarts and hearts, you can't tell what color of skin somebody is by their brain or their heart, what gender they are, what their preference is, what religion. You're measuring what really matters. And so we talk about creating meaning through learning, purpose through work. Mark Twain said the two most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. And so we look at how complex all these issues are in education, all these dynamics, things change in demographics and all the things I just talked about. And they say, well, there's no silver bullet. But I really do think there is a silver bullet, and that's love. If we love our neighbors, we love ourselves, I really believe that we can change the world for good, and that can start tonight. But looking at this is not about Christian view. This is in every major religion. In the Old Testament, love your neighbors yourself. New Testament, love your neighbors yourself. There's no commandment greater than these. This is from Islam. Not one of you truly believes until you wish for others what you wish for yourself. And in Hindu, this is the sum of duty. Do not unto others which you would cause pain have done to you. So make your dash count. Have a great conference. Thank you so much for being here.